Hi, everyone, and welcome to this CG Cookie stream. This has been kind of a crazy morning for me, so I'm going to do my best to kind of stay organized, and I think I have a pretty good setup so far. But what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be going over 9 Paintover and critiques, and then from there, I'm going to go ahead and reveal the contest winners from our summer Poke contest. And there were a lot of entries, and I have to say I was very impressed. So as people are joining in, if you want to put where you're watching from, I always like to see where everyone is watching from around the world. And I will finish up the marketing post here, and then we'll go ahead and get started. And also let me know if my mic volume is working. I just redid some of the back end with the settings, so I want to make sure that you guys can hear me all right. And thank you, Matthias Smelly, for following. We haven't even done anything yet. How do you know what you're going to be following? But thank you. And part of the reason I'm so kind of frantic, I think, this morning, and I'll show you guys what I've been working on for CG Cookie. But we just started going pretty much 70% full time on making our next game. We're hopefully making a game in the next year, but it will most likely start off on Steam. But we're really shooting for it to land on Nintendo's Wii U, or if their new console comes out by then, probably that one, and hopefully PS4. So that is in the works as of Monday, and it's kind of crazy. I was appointed as the art director, but there's a lot of things with environment stuff that they need me to do, and I'm really struggling. I think it's good that I can acknowledge that I'm not good at environments. I have confidence when it comes to being handed like a character assignment or doing something with traditional pencils, but I have to be honest with myself that I'm not a very good environment artist. And I will be working over the next 3 to 5 months to become an environment artist as well. So I'll share with you guys on some of the things that I've been working on so far. Okay, let me make sure everything is good. Okay, it sounds like everyone says the mic is fine. Awesome to hear. And it seems like a lot of you guys are watching from. We got a lot. Even some from the underworld. That's a new one. Sean from Starbucks. Welcome, Sean. Uh, and if you guys have any questions, make sure you do at CG Cookie Concept before you type it. And then that way, when I'm looking up, I can quickly see it in the comment section so that I can go back to what I'm working on. Okay, let's see here. Okay, we're good to go. Okay, so hi everyone. Officially, welcome to the CG Cookie Concept live stream. We do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Time. And usually I post a topic about 2 hours beforehand, but I will usually let you guys know the week stream before what topic I'm thinking of doing. Next week, I actually am not sure what we're going to be working on just because of how much has been going on this week. But essentially, if you are new to the streams, I want this to be a very open communication back and forth. So if you have any questions regarding digital art, concept art, getting a job in the industry, whatever it might be, even if it's a simple Photoshop question. But today's going to be treated a little differently. I do these about once every season, so every summer, winter, fall, spring, just like our contest. And essentially, I asked you guys if you could send me submissions of work that you want me to do a critique slash paint over on. And the reason I do these is because these are invaluable as an artist. And that's why the stream question of the day is, do you have someone you can receive constructive critique from? And I think it became even more evident to me yesterday that I am so thankful that I have some art friends that I can lean on and just be like, hey guys, I don't know how to do environments. Like, could you just share with me how you get started? Or here's what I've been working on. What do you see wrong with it? Where do you think I can get better? And you want to find people that are very blunt and honest. And you don't want to just find someone that just says, that looks good all the time, because that's not actually going to help you in the long run. You want to find people that can look at your piece objectively and can point out and nitpick like what looks wrong, what could be better. And you want to find people that you trust as well. So for this live stream, I'm going to pretty much be acting as that friend that you give your piece to and be like, hey, what could be improved upon? And I'm just going to give you my honest feedback, and hopefully I can do it the best I can. I'm trying to stick it to around 10 minutes per piece because we have 9 pieces that I randomly selected last night. And oh yeah, as I'm looking at the comments, Digital actually did create a live stream idea center where if you guys have any input on what you would like to see me do during these streams, if you see below, I even create a little bubble box for it. And it has like a baker looking all, misfuddled. He's like, wonder what we should do on the next stream. If you just click that link, it'll give you that forum. Okay, so anyways, here is the timer I am working with. Essentially, I have it on my Google. I'm just going to click start for each one, and then whenever the timer runs out, I'm going to have to reset it because I need to work pretty fast if I want to get all of these in and then still do the contest results at the end. So if you guys came just for the contest results, you got to wait till the very end. So stay around for that, and I think I'm going to get started. So here we go. Oh yeah, I was going to show you first. Let me show you that before we get into these. Okay, so I am not an environment artist, and I know this. But last night, and actually the night before, I've been asked to do more environment pieces as kind of a example piece for the rest of the crew to work off of, and they can start doing their 3D modeling. So this is what I first came up with, and I realized that I can kind of cheat things with color, and I'm trying my best to be aware not to do that. Because I can create a mood in a piece, but if you really look at the subject matter, I think it's still very basic, and I need to be pushing myself further. So I've gotten a lot of critique from my friends last night, and then even our coworkers this morning. I'm definitely going to be pushing that further. And then even last night, I was with my friend Pui and Sean and Key and Tyler and Gia. And anyways, they were sharing with me about how I need to be working more with shape language. And I started using the selection tool and just like creating random shapes with it and then filling it in and then trying to create the illusion of trees and brush from that. So it's definitely been an interesting journey. I think this might be something I do on a live stream. I saw it actually requested in the community idea center, and it was one of those where they want to see me get uncomfortable with something that I'm not familiar with. And I think one of these days I might actually do something like this where I just paint random trees just to show you guys that I do struggle, and I need to realize, and you guys need to realize that when you're doing something that you know you're not strong with, you have to take the necessary steps to improve your work upon that. So I think with environments, I'm getting frustrated with it, but I think it's a good frustration. So whenever you get frustrated with your own work, usually that's a good sign because you know you can do better. You just can't get to where you see your own work progressing. You're still stuck at like the bottom level. So just trust me, that happens with everyone. Even though I feel pretty confident if I was giving a character design, if I was given a subject matter like trees, I kind of fumble and I stumble a little bit, but as long as you're still running toward that goal, you're fine. All right. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started because we have a very, very limited amount of time today. And I'm going to, you know what? I'm going to actually put the timer on the bottom corner, I think. No. I'm going to put it, I'll put it over here. Right there. Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead and get started on these. Okay, now, like I said, this stream, I'm going to be just shooting questions, or I'm going to be talking and rambling like nonstop. So if I don't get to a lot of the questions, I'm sorry. I just want to try to fit in as much as I can in each submission. So I promise you, I'm not ignoring you. I'm not intentionally not answering questions. It's just I really want to get through a lot. Okay. I am not says, could you consider having these streams a bit offset from the contest in the future? Yes, this will never happen again. I think this morning I've been kind of in a frantic mode and I want to never do that again. So yes. And actually, if you're looking forward to the Halloween contest, which will happen probably the 1st or 2nd of October, that's going to be our next seasonal contest. You are definitely going to want to look forward to that because we have 5 special guest judges that will be with me this time around rather than it just being me and some of the crew, because I think the rest of the crew. They're more focused on like 3D, and even like my main boss, Wes, he is more of like an overview manager now at this point. So I think I want to find people that have more of like an artistic eye to really give valid critique and as well as point out what the winner should be. So, and I think that's going to be the other prize with the next contest too. Like if you want to receive critique from each of the artists that I'm having as the judges panel, then you can get that as well. And remember, the getting constructive critique is invaluable. You want to find people in your life that can give you this. All right, so I'm going to shut up and actually start drawing now. I'm going to start my timer here. Okay, so I got 10 minutes. Okay, so this one is from, and I have the community thing pulled up as well. So this one is from Louis Berdicia. And they were asking about how to improve their line work, blending and shading with the colors. Any tips would be much appreciated. So when I look at this, immediately I can tell that you're bringing it in from a pencil drawing into digital, which is good. I just want you to know that if you don't want that pencil texture to be seen, I definitely think there needs to be more work done to this. And in terms of shading, I do see that most of the areas we have within the scene are still rather flat. I think any of the shadows that are added, it's very minimal. And if you really want to start rounding out your shapes and give it form, let's go ahead and start painting over. So I did look at some of these last night when I was in my hangout with some of my art crew, and I was getting feedback from them as I was doing some of the paintovers. So on this one, I started painting on Gengar's eye. Let me move in here. And you can see how it's a very minimal effect, but we're already starting to bulge it out and we're getting more of a form to it. Now, the one thing I would definitely recommend for everyone, this doesn't even just specifically pertain to Louis, is have a hue and saturation adjustment layer at the very top. Now to create this, it's on the very bottom with the circle that's cut in half. You click it, choose hue and saturation, and where is my, hold on. I'm working on 3 screens today. So sometimes like the mini menu will pop up on one of the other screens. Oh, why are you not pop? Where are you? There you are. There you are. Okay. So this property menu will come up and then you turn the saturation all the way down to 0. And the reason you want to do this is so that you can see the forms as clear as possible. So you can see there was actually more contrast before with the eye that he did, but you can see how I'm starting to round it out more with the eye that I have added on top, but now it's in the grayscale, it's more flat looking. So from here, if we really wanted to start rounding it out, not only am I going to work with hue contrast, but I'm going to start playing with value contrast as well. And this is probably the easiest way to round something out if you're working with the value spectrum. So from dark to light, if you want to add value to anything, that's the easiest way to add form to it. Now, I try to work with adding contrast and form through saturation and hue, and that's a whole nother spectrum of color. I think color is one of the most interesting things to work on with art, and it's one of those things that you are constantly always improving on. I would say color and light are the 2 things that no one ever truly masters. You're always a student when it comes to those 2 properties. And now you can see, okay, when I turn the grayscale on, now we're starting to get more of those lighter values in it, and that's why it's rounding out even more than when I didn't have them. You can see before and after. And I'm slightly pushing around the edge of the eye. So let me even grab, I'm going to grab a skin brush. So let's say we wanted to make Gengar really look like he's snickering. There we go. You can see the difference before and after. And I know we're looking at this upside down. I'll rotate it so it's easier for you guys to see. So you can see how just by adding more of these subtle hints like around the eye, we're giving more illusion to the eye being pushed into this head area, and that's why the forms are bumping out the way that they are. So if we were even to do it, let's say, let me find somewhere else other than just gas, or other than Gengar. No, I feel like Gengar is the best one. Or okay, like even on this Pokeball here. I can see that you started the shadow line here. I'll rotate it back around. And I want to see that shadow continued all the way around the ball. So in this case, it's still unclear to me where your light source is. I get the impression that it's coming from the front, but you really want to push it off where the light source is easy to read everywhere in the scene, not just on like one or two objects. Because like on Haunter, I feel like there's no lighting at all. And that could just be because this is an in progress picture, but I think it's something to note moving forward. So with the Pokeball, the light source is indicating, based on this highlight here, that the light source is coming from this general direction, and that's why there's a shadow on this side. Now, if the highlight is there, the shadow would actually probably be more like this and cut around, and you'd want to work in that regard. So now if this was our defined light source, you need to add that everywhere. So on Gengar, on the person himself, you definitely want to add more of a shadow. And I think there is some even proportion issues with the face here. So I would really experiment with pushing the forms out, because right now the face almost reads as if it's like on a flat plane. But instead, if we start pushing out the forms, now mind you, I'm going to try to do this quickly. And even have the eye closer, somewhere around there. And then really push the eye more on this side. Oops. Even that's too much. I need to like look back for a second. Because even like the side of this head could have more of a form to it. And the one thing I always see is when you're drawing at this 3/4 angle, you really need to focus on where the back of the head meets the neck. Because right now it feels like it's separated, almost like an action figure or a Barbie doll. You know how their head is just like placed right onto the cylinder. You really want to make sure that you're giving some depth to the area behind the neck, and usually you can do that by showing the actual jawline and the neck behind it. Now, when it comes to lining things up proportionally too with the face, I want you to focus on the little nuances that the face has. So like on my face, you can see how the top of the eyebrow matches with where the nose starts, and then the bottom of the nose actually lines up with your ear. So if you can keep that in mind whenever you're doing faces, your eyebrow and the bottom of your nose, if you just carry that line all the way around, should pretty much match up with the size of your ear. So I think when you're doing these human characters, I do think the eyes are too big too. I know this might be going more toward a style, but it just reads as very incomplete right now. So I would carry that around the head. And I would probably make your ear, I would push it down lower. Okay, now I know the other thing you want to talk about is how can you improve your lines. Right now your lines feel very controlled and a little too forced. I think it would help if you became more loose. Something that I was so resistant on doing for so long was my art teacher was saying that I should draw with my arm and not my wrist. And I swear to you, it's only been in like the past few months that I've really adapted that, and I really see the improvement in my work. So even with the hand, I want to see less rigidness with each of like even the fingers. It just feels really tight, and I want you to try loosening up and get more of those subtlety curves that the human body has. Anything that's organic has a lot more subtleties than I think we realize. Now, let's see, I have about a minute left. Okay, so the other thing I want to see you start doing is really play up your values. So if the light source is actually coming from that direction, this red, I would actually play with some variance of the red as it has more of a gradation around it because it's a round object. So on the bottom of the Pokeball, I'd probably have it be more of like this color. Why, thank you, Lower Graveyard, for following. And even with the shine, I feel like it's too placed on. You can have fun with having like a pre-highlight and then a highlight on top. Because right now, all the surfaces too read as the same. So I think this is another thing where play with the different materials that you have in your scene, what reflects light very heavily, what absorbs it. Because in this case, the Pokeball, if it's shiny, if we're treating it like a metallic surface, it would actually have more of a reflection to it. And then you can play with more highlights like on the metal strip, whatever that black thing is that holds the ball together. And you could even have some fun with color on it. Oh, it beeps at me. I did not know that was going to happen. So that was my 10 minutes. So really quick, before I move on to the next, I would also try playing with your layer mode. So in this case, they're called blend modes. If you click here, make a new layer, and then click here, you can see how there's a menu of all the different ones. Try playing with overlay and multiply. Those were the first two that I was introduced to. And you can see how it really makes the color more vivid, but you want to be careful not to overdo it. I know I definitely tended to overdo it when I first learned what overlay and multiply does. And it's an easy way to experiment with color. So I definitely recommend at least testing this out. All right, so I want you to keep pushing forward and really work on those values and proportions. I can see where you're going. I think that you have some flat base to what you have, and I want you to keep pulling out those forms. All right, our next one here. Let me start my timer again. And we're off. Okay, so this one is from, I should know your name by now, I'm sorry, Miss Chibi Artist, Maria. I remember doing the Paintover on your last one. You did a Noctis piece, and it was really cool to see you submit another one and see the growth in between there and now. I do feel like you've definitely worked on how clean it reads, where the Noctis one I remember being kind of scattered and a little messy in areas, where you definitely cleaned it up on this one. And I think I'm going to give some of the same critique with this one, but I'm going to keep refining it because I see the path you're on, and I'm just going to keep pushing you down that path because I think you're in the right direction here. Okay. So the first thing I noticed when I first opened it was I really like the color palette that you have. I feel like it's very contained. It's very earthy. There's a very overall sense of neutrality, and then the blue offsets it, and I think that creates that really awesome balance. So good job on your color picking, and I'm just going to try to enhance that as we go further, because I don't think I want you to kind of challenge yourself with color as much. I want you to focus more on refinement and blending. I think those are the two things, and actually a little bit of proportion. So this was one where when I was talking to my friends, they immediately said that the head feels too small. So we tried enlarging it, and immediately I saw it looked a little better, but I know that this might be more of your style, so I don't want to infringe on that. But I just want you to know that isn't just me that was seeing more proportion issue. And maybe if this is too big for you, I'll just make it a touch smaller again. But not too much smaller though. Oops. Something like there. And the other thing that I think didn't read well was whether or not the hair had like a mystic glow to it, or if it was supposed to be like a blue fire or magic of some kind. So what I did is I just blended some of the area around it. And you can see how now we have more of an effect where the glow is almost like has an aura off of the flame. And that's why this reads as not as clear, or not as, doesn't have that clarity to it that this shape does. And it clearly reads that this is part of the actual hair. And I'm pretty sure I did it on this layer. I did. Okay. The face, I just turned down how much contrast was within it, because I love the way that you're rendering like areas down here with like the arm. I love that you're not relying on value to create your form. I already can recognize the arm. It feels like an arm, and you're not working with like a crazy high contrast. So if I turn on my hue and saturation, you can see how it's very subtle, but the subtlety in the shape of the value, or the lighter versus the darker as we start rounding up out around the arm, it's very light, but it really does give the impression of the arm. And I want to see this carried into areas like the face. You can see how the face then has a very high contrast. So if you carry the same approach that you treated the arm into the face, I think it would just read better overall. Oh, and then I think the other thing was the stomach. Yeah, so the stomach was another area where the darker patches of skin, it didn't really read as, I don't know if they were supposed to be abdominal muscles, but it just looked kind of muddy. So I just did I cleaned it up with like a base color, and if you wanted to have more of the shadow around where the fur is, oops, I think keep your shadow minimum, and maybe even have like one where this bone structure, the shadow would be casted onto the skin itself. But for the most part, I would keep that skin more of a minimal range. You don't want to go too crazy with contrast, because if you do that everywhere, that's where it becomes kind of hard to read for any viewer. Oh, you know what? Let me make sure I keep looking up as well. Gatling Bear says, I do not have someone I can ask for critique, but I'm considering paying someone on Patreon for it. Is that bad? No, I think that's great. If you can find someone that you really trust and want their feedback on, I would definitely consider paying them to do it. It's almost like a mentorship at that point. Okay, now when it comes to the proportions, I really like that you're going for it. And the fact that you're showing your hands. I think this is something that I saw when I was in college. It's the easiest way is like to hide your hands in pocket. Like if you don't want to draw them on characters, I see artists do this all the time, where they'll put their hands in the pockets. They'll have like one arm behind the back, or like this hand is like barely faint. And I used to do that all the time. So I understand why. And I'm glad that you approached this and was like, no, I'm going to show my hands. I'm going to show that I can draw them. And even if they look a bit wonky, I'm learning. So I wanted to start off by saying that because I want you to continue doing this. But I do see there are some proportion errors, and it doesn't read as well as I think you would like. So to fix this, definitely use reference. Take a picture of yourself in that position. Well, I think you blew. I could not read that fast enough, but thank you for following. Definitely look at the way that the hand goes around the object, and don't feel like you have to include every single nail, every single knuckle. I think for me, that was the hardest thing to learn about drawing hands. And once I realized that hands are weird creatures, like if you look at the different positions you can have them in, and you don't have to have it look perfect, where it's like every hand doesn't have to look like a perfect hand. I want you to really make it look like this character is gripping onto whatever it is, or if it's resting on this pole, I really want to see how the fingers are overlapping and show some of that. And then with the hand down here, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so with the glove, I felt like the fingers were so long that it almost gave the impression that they started somewhere in the glove, which would make this part of the hand. Now, I don't know if this is like a different race or creature, because I know it looks very similar to the Mithra in Final Fantasy XIV, but if this is more of like a humanistic character where we're trying to keep some of the proportions almost exact as a human, this part of the hand, the square part, is way too small. And the fingers, it's like coming down to here. So you want to raise that up. And you can see how it's actually webbed in the hand. I should be going closer. So the other mistake I see young artists make too all the time is the knuckle and the webbing, or like the separation of the finger, are not on the same level. This is kind of hard for me to do with the camera right there. But you can see how like where the finger actually parts, it's actually way higher than where the knuckle is. So you want to keep that in mind, that wherever the knuckles are, so in this case, if your knuckles are here, the fingers are actually connected somewhere around this point. So you want to bring that up, and then the knuckle part would actually be like on the top. Now, the glove itself, I don't know if it's like one of those fashion Gaga gloves where it like comes halfway up the hand, but in this case, I think it would read better if you brought the glove down. So it really wraps around the finger itself. something like that. And if you wanted that patch of skin showing through, you can do it that way. So you can see how before the fingers look really elongated and long. So now you can hopefully push that down a bit. Now, in terms of, I'm pretty sure, yes, the other thing you were asking was, should you do any more rendering for the materials to make them read better as the materials that they are? I do think you do. In terms of like the belt, I think I started it on one of these layers. I did. So on this layer, I started working on the belt, but if this is meant to be a leather belt, you're definitely in the right direction. You don't want to overdo it with your contrast, but I definitely think you need some more. And this is where, if you really want it to read as a texture, I would throw in a texture brush just to see an experiment with if you like the actual result of how it looks. I'm going to play with this one actually. Now, I'm not worrying about if I go outside of the belt layer right now because I know I can erase it after. Something like that. Oops. And I do this all the time where I'll do a quick test and then erase the excess. And with leather, if we want it to have more of a grungy texture look, play with the edge of the texture on whatever brush you're using. And I would say keep putting those little nuances. So if there's a belt loop here, there's probably holes or something that the belt loop would actually go in. And I would just add those subtle little details. It's amazing how much more of a quality of a material you can get if you add just those little nuances of texture here and there. Yep. And my timer's up, but I'm going to do one more thing on this piece before I move to the next. And that's with metal. Metal is highly reflective as compared to any other kind of material where it would absorb light. So with this belt buckle, oops, I'm going to switch to actually a chalk brush, my go-to brush. And the best way that I remember someone teaching me how to do metal is all through contrast. So right now you have kind of like one area of highlight. I would change that to 2 and 3 if you can. So it would go from light to dark to light. And then I would really push the highlight on that. Well, I thank you, CMH39, for following. Oops. Uh-oh. Color picker's on a different screen. Okay, so I'm going to choose a very light. You can see how I'm not using white because I always recommend never using black or white. And I'm going to just pull it here. Why, thank you, Cisco Jeep 1967 for following. You guys have the best usernames on here. So I'm going to really try to push that highlight and then drop that drop shadow that's behind the belt on the actual belt loop itself. Well, thank you, Twisted XP, for following. All right, so now if I zoom out, let's see what that looks like before and after. So you can see how they're very small changes, but it's really starting to wrap more of a material look to what you're looking for. So I hope that was helpful. And okay, let me go ahead and start moving on to the next. And thank you for submitting again. It's really cool seeing the growth from the last time that we did this to this time. Okay, so this is Shaman Girl. Oop. Oh, you know what? I can't see the follower names anymore. My other screen went black, but thank you for following. All right. So on Shaman Girl, this one was submitted by, let me scroll up. This is Jari. I'm going to start my timer. Start. The main thing was they felt like this had a cartoony feel, but they didn't want that. They wanted to ask, should it be more subtle with the lights? And they had troubles with the outfit. And they wanted to make the dress more flowy. Okay, so with this one, immediately I was like, oh man, I would love it if that green light kind of became the strongest light in the scene. So I just did a quick multiply layer. All I did was I duplicated the layer, changed it to multiply to get more of a darker atmosphere to the piece. And then I believe this was an overlay. I used an overlay layer and I really amped up that green. Now, actually, this is a bit much now that I look at it now. But you can see how now that green, that's our light source. So I want everywhere in the scene itself to reflect that light source. And this is where it becomes kind of tricky. And this is where rendering kind of becomes meticulously painful for some artists. I love doing this, but I know this isn't for everyone. So in this case, this green light now has to be reflected everywhere in the scene to really make this work. And you can see how you started to do that with like the bottom area, how it's reflecting on the rocks. It's kind of on her clothes and on the mask. I would say even take that further to the next level. I would take that green and I would really lay it on pretty heavy, especially where it's closer to the actual beam of light, whatever this magical aura is. So I think the amount of green on the rock is all right. I think this is one of those things where if the light is coming from this direction, it really should be on the entire rock. If you really want it to be like this strong glow. And then to break it up, I know this was something that I learned that was really nice, was just throw in like a separation gap on the rock, because then it immediately says that this rock has like a chip or a dent in it, and it adds just a little bit more texture than what it had before. Rafa says, Tim, any book recommendation to learn perspective or life drawing? Any book by Giovanni, and I'll put this in the link on the after post, but his name is Giovanni Civardi. He's my favorite life drawing book art. Let me just find it really quick. There it is. So it's called Drawing Human Anatomy. And the reason I like it so much is because it has like realistic proportions, and it's not just a superhero guy. It's like a lean looking human being, and it just feels more natural. So this is definitely my number one recommendation if you're looking to draw anatomy, or looking to learn it, I should say. All right, back to this drawing. So the other thing was, how do I make this dress more of a flow? Right now, it does read as very stagnant, and you want it to have more of overlapping feel. So in this case, like really have fun with your swoops, as Sean Price would say. I'm pretty sure he's here watching. But yeah, keep those swoops strong. And in this case, you can see how the ones under her here, they're not really doing much for you besides just kind of acting as a triangle. My favorite thing to do when I first started working with cloth was to overlap them and then have them almost come to a point. So there's like a pinching effect that it looks like. And let me show you what that would look like drawn. So if under her we're getting more of this like gray bounce light reflected. Something like that. So now you can see the underside of the cloth as well. And I think that will help you, if you keep exploring that, really push those pinch areas. Because I think that's when my fabrics actually became a lot more realistic and believable. And there's another one later on this stream that I'm going to give the same critique to because it was along the same line. I'm seeing everyone give love to Sean right now. I definitely want to have Sean on the stream when he's planning to come up in October. So if you want to see Sean on another one of these streams, I would definitely look forward to one of them in October. And Sean will actually be one of the judges in the Halloween contest. So get on good terms with him while you can if you want to get some, what is that, like insider leverage into winning the contest. And that's totally not true. The reason that I like all the art friends that I have now is they're very honest with one another, including myself. So whenever I'm feeling like one of my pieces isn't looking right, I can give it to pretty much any one of them and they'll tell me immediately what they think could be improved upon. And that's what I'm doing here with you guys is I really want to give honest feedback and critique because this is honestly how you grow as an artist. You have to recognize your faults or what you're weak in, and if you should ask for help, but don't always rely on that. Always try to figure it out yourself first. And if you're really still struggling even after that, that's when you should bring the people that you trust in and just be like, hey guys, I could use an extra pair of eyes on this. Yeah, Sean was the tattoo artist. And soon I want him to be recognized as the illustrator. All right, so that's how I would start to make your clothes feel more loopy. Now, mind you, this is only one pinch. Imagine if we had like 2 or 3, depending on like how windy or how crazy it was down in this waterfall area. Because you don't want to just add a bunch of swoops or like a bunch of like airflow that would carry this cloth up. If you're in kind of this cave with a waterfall, there's probably not much of a wind draft coming through. So that's another thing to think about is you want to be somewhat sensible in the logic that you're putting into your piece itself. So in this case, I think it's okay because maybe this magic is like as it's spinning around her, it's creating this wind blown effect. But just be aware that that's something you want to not overdo or not at least think about, you know. The other thing I want to note is with the rendering, I think one of the things that we have to talk about is what is over rendering. Over rendering is when you push a piece so much where I think like even some of that actually none of this feels over rendered to me, but you do want to be careful about how far you push it where you're adding detail where it's actually taking away from the piece. So that's what over rendering is, and I think there's one piece later on that I can talk about that further. But in terms of this one, like with these boots, I want to see more detail on these. I don't know how detailed you wanted this scene to get, but at least something that's more interesting because right now this looks like very simple brown boot. And I think for this character, if this is like a shaman mage or whatever type of character this is, I would really push it up, especially if the top half feels a lot more interesting than the bottom half. Now, in terms of the proportions, I do see some proportion issue. I think with her body, and I'm thinking it should actually be pushed in just to, based on how thick her arms are. I feel like her arms actually should be a little thicker on both ends. And then the shoulder here, this feels very disconnected. Where I would even raise this up just a little bit. And even her left side boob, I think should be lifted. So it's more fitting with the stance and the proportion you have now. Right now, it feels very heavy around just this area and in the back. So I want to push you to keep adjusting some of those proportions. And then definitely add in that light after. Something like that. So keep pushing this forward. And then like the belt is another area where the rest of her feels great in terms of darkening this red hue for her clothing. But the belt is such a standout blinding belt that it almost gives the impression that it has its own like illumination to it. I would definitely darken that. Even if it's meant to be a white belt, when you're in a cave and your light sources are coming from like way right and behind you, there really is no way that that belt should be that light. And I found that kind of distracting. So you can see how if we darken things up, because if our main light source is that waterfall, really play up that like that's the light source. And the green is almost like this secondary cool light source. Oh, that is my timer. Okay, so let me show you the before. So you can see how before that light white is kind of stark and it doesn't really lend itself to the piece. Where if you darken it up, it really then gives the impression, okay, the waterfall, there's a light source somewhere behind her, and then the green is acting as our secondary light source. So that's what I would do to keep pushing this piece, and I would keep working on adding little details, because right now you're doing what I used to do where it'd be very monotone. Like the boot feels very monotone. These rocks feel very monotone. The rock she was standing on it's just too simple. So take it to that next level of, okay, how do I break this up? It can either be with texture. You could literally separate like on the rock how we did down there. Just keep working with making it a little more interesting. Okay, our next one here. This one is from, let me see if I have a question here. Okay, I am not says, Tim, did you ever have long lapses of time when you didn't work on swordplay, or did you always work on it somewhat regularly? Oh man, I wish I could say I have worked on it regularly, but I haven't. But now I'm kind of getting into a flow where it's like every month I at least have 2 or 3 new things for it. So that makes me feel a little better, but I definitely could be working on it more fully. And actually, I can give you guys a sneak peek. Where did I put it? Is this one it? I think this is it. I can show you where I'm at with one of them. Then this is like our intermission time. So it's loading up right now. Let me see if I can find another question here. I am not. We have no idea how old he actually is. Eve says, whoever did this picture, you can see the Tim influence in it. A little bit. Yeah, it was kind of funny opening it. All right, so here is a little sneak peek at my current illustration. This is my character, Christina. And I have actually been working on it, not every day, but last week I found a pretty good inspiration push, and I just went for it. I still think I need to find reference where I'm going to take pictures of my roommate Ashley in a similar wardrobe and then set her in my uncle's pool and just take pictures of her from over above, just because I want to see like how the water interacts with the clothing itself. Where are the areas of her skin that are underwater versus above water? Things that I've never really worked on before. And even like her hair floating in the water. I'm very thankful to all of you that have given me pictures and references of girls floating in water with like their hair. That has actually really helped. So thank you guys for doing that. So yeah, so this is where I'm at with it right now. I'm hoping to have this piece done sometime in the next month. I'm really, really like excited to get this going because I have a lot of cons that start in January. So I want this to be a print available. Okay, done with our intermission here. I'm gonna throw that thing away. All right, let's get right back at it. Oh, you guys have asked some questions. Okay. Lydian Art says, thank you so much for your advice. Swoops are going to become my best friends. Yes, that is what Sean Price's best friend, and it can be yours too. Aruna Dan says, do you have any pet peeves in art? Yeah, I think they're more personal things from when I went to school. Things like I'm really not a fan of like super harsh white rim light. I don't like things that aren't functional. I think that's why I have some problems with steampunk when it's done wrong. It just feels like a gear that's glued onto a hat, where I love seeing steampunk where it actually functions, but I think that's another pet peeve I have. But I'm very nitpicky, I would say. So I don't know. I could just be one of those people that are like, but it's not functional, you know? Anyways. Okay. Let me go ahead and get started on this, and then I'll answer some of the questions you guys have. Because I think with this piece, and this is from Fabian, they said, do all the materials read as the way that they're supposed to? Is the hair flat? Pretty much a question about, is everything flat? And they're working on creating it as realistic as possible. So I'm definitely going to work on some realistic elements here. So I'm going to start the timer. Let me get some questions here. Tim, I started following you on Instagram, and the first thing I saw was you dancing in a pool with sparklers. Yeah, that was a crazy fun night. Faithful Imagination says, the place where her chest is coming above the water looks a little too round and perfect, but it might be that way. No, you're right. My dad even pointed that out when I asked him what he thought of it, and he said it looked too perfect. SL33X says, I actually have no one I can get critiques from. Find someone. That is your new mission. Coco Shock says, wow, the hair is coming along very well. Thank you very much. Flamaru says, but swooping is bad. If you get that reference. Oh, I think it's swiping. Swiper, no swiper. All right. Let me go ahead and get started on this piece. So with this one, it's very, very symmetrical, and it actually doesn't read as realistic to me. Now, if that is really the goal that you're trying to hit, I'm going to give you some tips on how to make this feel more realistic. But right now, it feels very stylized, and that's not a bad thing. This could just be your style. I think it's very clean, and I think we can push it further. But in terms of it being more realistic, let me give you some just first impression and what I think could be done. So immediately as I zoom in, the skin is very perfect, which once again, that might just be your style, but if we really wanted to push it, I would break up the skin. And you don't have to have like acne scars and freckles everywhere, but I'm going to use this texture brush. And this is actually my chalk brush. This is like my go-to brush. If you guys want to use my brushes that you see on the stream, they're on cgcookie.com. You can download this one definitely for free, and I would definitely test it out if you've been interested in something more of a textural result. All right, then when we get to the nose, don't be afraid to get dark on the inside of this nose and make it bigger than you might think. And I'll explain why. So I used to draw noses where literally the nostril would be just a black line, kind of what you have here. And then I remember looking at a photo where you could actually see the light bounce somewhat into the nose. So then it was like a gradient of where it was super dark on that top line, but then as we faded down out of the nose, it became more of like a transitional gradient from this darker value to a lighter one. Something like that. And you know what? We could even push the darker part of the nostril. Like that. And then same with the nose. I'm just going to break up some of that textural area. Now, I just want to keep reinforcing that I don't think this is wrong, because I think it could just be your style. But if you're really trying to get more of a realistic approach, I would definitely try breaking it up with some texture, or even if you wanted to do with your circle hard edge brush, which I think that's the one you're using, just play with it more so it doesn't read so perfect. And I think the other thing that might be intriguing for you is throw in some different colors. I think your skin, actually the colors you used are awesome. I think though, if you wanted to have more to it, start throwing in like some red tints into the cheek, or some blue into the bottom chin area. And like immediately I want to like draw in some freckles or something that just breaks up the monotony of like perfect clearasil skin. And then when it comes to the eye, I think the iris itself actually reads kind of big. And once again, I'm just going to, only because you wanted to push this more toward like realism. And then for the eyes, in terms of like the eyelashes, you want to make sure you add in what is called a water line, which is the line right under the eye. And then your eyelashes actually start not right at the line of the eye, but on the edge of that water line. Now, with guys, it's always been one of those interesting things of like, how do you draw eyelashes on a guy? And I get that question all the time of like, I struggle with making my male characters not feel overly feminine, or I don't want them to look like they're wearing eyeliner, mascara, but whenever I add eyelashes, it always gives that impression. So my advice would be not to make them too dark and not to really add too much focus on them. Have it be more of a subtle effect that you're adding in these eyelashes. Because like right now, actually before I even add in those eyelashes, this upper part feels like a line of eyeliner that was put above the eyelashes. Now, if your character is going to be seen from far away, that's when it's okay to have something like that because the eyelashes are more implied. But if this is a portrait and it's really close up, I would at least try to have maybe less of that line and then carry under some of those eyelash marks like this. I'm going to even actually, there's that little exposed muscle in the corner of your eyeball. Oh, that's too pink. Hold on. I want to make that more apparent here. And then usually there's a highlight on that little bump that's in that weird exposed muscle area. And the other thing that I think took me a while to learn is try not to have a very sharp edge on everything within the eye. So like even though the iris and the pupil feel like it has a very sharp edge to it, just try softening it up just a little bit, and you may see that it actually reads as more realistic. Oops. And then with the eyebrows, let me get to those. I think this gives you like a good opportunity where if he's not plucking his eyebrows, I would definitely have more of a gradation of the eyebrows. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So the center can be more thick and solid. And I know that when I'm even drawing my own characters, I kind of like having a very thick eyebrow. But once again, in terms of realism, you want to break that up. Because the eyebrows are not going to be the solid mass of a rectangle. You are going to have somewhat of a fade off at the beginning and at the end of an eyebrow. Something like that. And then for the hair also feels very perfect. This is a good chance for you to really break it up. And if you feel like it's reading too flat, I actually think you have an amazing base right now, where if you just added like some subtle highlights onto it, I think that's all you would really need to really break up this hair. And I like to keep my hair more matte looking as well, so I understand not wanting to go crazy with highlights. But one more time, if you want to go for more of a realistic look, I think having just a touch more of those realistic elements would help out. And then even having some areas that the hair doesn't completely follow the hairline. I'll throw some random squiggles back here. Okay, let me stop that timer. Okay, so if you see before and after, ooh, I kind of like squished his eye there. But I think you guys get the general impression of if you wanted to go for a more realistic look, you definitely want to break up how smooth and almost like it's like clay almost. It's too perfect, and you want to just break it up with more texture and let some of those imperfections be seen. Go a little crazy with the hair on how it's not one just giant swoop. And I know my hair is probably not the best example because it's just a messy mop, but even if you have this kind of mop hair like we have on this character, still try to break it up with the different shapes and even look at references. So I hate to say it, but like if you remember Zac Efron in the High School Musical movies, or even Justin Bieber for a while, he kind of had that mop hair, and his was actually more perfect looking, kind of like this. But even him, he had those highlights that I think he would be a good reference if this is the kind of character you're trying to create. Okay. So that was that one. Let's see. I think we have 4 more. So I'm going to reset our timer here. And thanks to you for everyone for sticking around. I see the comments going really fast, so I'm sorry that I can't get to them as much as I usually can, but I want to thank you to everyone that's been answering in the comments. So thank you. Like, well, I won't name people out specifically, but you know who you guys are. Thank you guys. Okay, so this one was submitted from... Oh, Faithful Imagination. I knew that. This is Faith. I could tell. Actually, I can even tell by the colors that you're using and the way that everything has like this aura glow to it. I feel like that is very Faith. So I'm going to start my timer here. Okay, started. Now, the thing that you were talking about, how you weren't able to finish this piece because you're not in love with it and it doesn't feel the way you want it to feel. And immediately as I look at it, and as this is one of the ones that I talked about with my friends last night, it feels like the glow is actually too much. It's overwhelming. Where if you want to like isolate that glow to be more into like here, like really put the focus on the 2 elements that you want the viewer's eye to go to, I think then the glow should definitely be like illuminating and what is that? Emanating? It's one of those E words. Emuting? Well, anyways, you want the glow to be centralized, especially if she is more of like this fire element. You want that glow to be centralized around her and then have the other areas around it kind of reflect that. So as we get further away, I would actually not put so much of a glow on the elements around it. Okay, so Sean said that you should add more swooshes. So even with the water, it seems like you got a good first one going, but really then play with it. I would imagine he would also critique that you should have like some of that water going behind and let those swooshes kind of build upon themselves. But I do agree that it could use a little bit more. Emitting. Thank you, Christy McAvee. Thank you. And when I look at this, immediately I look at the proportions and the way that you're shading the characters. I think that's just the way that my eye is kind of tuned into doing that. So with your male character, I feel like the way that you're shading, the way that you shaded some of the upper body feels a bit misplaced, where I started painting over. And you can see how even with like his abdominals or the place in between the chest, don't feel like you have to give it a hard separation edge. Because like even on guys with the chest, unless if they're like huge bodybuilders, you probably won't have like a refined muscle line down the center. It'll be very subtle. So instead of having this sharp line, oh, that's right. Thank you for whoever just followed. I can't see, my second screen went black, so I can't actually see the stream itself, but thank you. Okay, so you can see how there's like a sharp cut in between his pectoral muscles. And then even with his abdominals, you see the sharp cut. And then it almost looks like a bruise on the side of his body. And I'm pretty sure that's not what you were going for. So I just smoothed it out. And then based on the direction of the light source, I just let it fade around the body itself. Now, if you wanted to get a bit more muscular with this, you definitely can. I flattened him out into like more of a not skinny, but not toned, but somewhere in between, where, thank you for whoever just followed, where you definitely want to push where the light source is coming from. And then since this is more of like a cylindrical object, the body is, you want to then look at that light source and then have a very, very, very minor gradation around, and then it'll get into the shadow area. In your shadow area, try your best to have it be one kind of color throughout the entire subject matter that you're working with. So I'm going to do the paint over on that, where I'm choosing this blue color shadow. Let me make sure. So I actually like, you can see in my color picker here, I think you guys can see this, where in the light area, it's higher on the value and less saturated, and that's true. As you get into more of the shadow area, it should become more saturated because light will usually desaturate and kind of wash out the color itself. So I'm going to work with this blue color as my shadow area. And I'm just going to work around and keep it pretty much a consistent color all the way. So like this jaw is a great example of there's no need for that lighter blue to be there, or even that ear, really. There might be like some of the edge of the ear possibly catching the light, but for the most part, we want that light source to really be strong, of like it's coming from this direction. And then we get some of the bubble that is kind of diffusing that dark blue that we're using. So I'm not going to push the shadow color too much on the top of there. Now, the thing that I immediately see then is like the area in the neck. We have a lot of harsh shadows going on in here, when if the light source is coming from her and it's emanating, I don't know why I can't say that word today, emitting light from her, it would probably be catching on the underside of his neck pretty much everywhere. So instead of having these kind of harsh shadows, I would grab your light color and lay that on. Same with his arm. Don't feel like you have to add shadows where they're not necessary. And then as we get closer to her, you really want, like, it almost surprised me that there was a shadow on the other side of this hand where the fingers are, because they're so close to the actual light source. You want to really make those a lighter blue. I would even push them to be lighter than this. So even with some of these shadows, I would just get rid of them. Try not to overcomplicate your lighting. Keep it very simple. Like, where's the light source? Would it fall on here? I think I tell myself that all the time when I'm working on my own work. And if I say, no, the light probably wouldn't be shining on this area, then I immediately make it darker. And just keep asking yourself that constantly while you're working. So like even this shoulder shadow here, let me zoom in for you guys. So this is a very defined shadow, but if the light source is coming from her and he's relatively close to it with that shoulder, there probably is no actual reason for that to be having a shadow. There might be a slight one near the back just because it's going downward, but for the most part, that will be in light. You can see how we do have a slight gradient going down the arm, and that's because the angle that the arm is receiving the light would hit strongest here, and then as we go further back the arm, it actually would kind of be more in a shadow until we get to the bicep area, because that is actually facing toward the light, so that would catch actually kind of like that. You can see how this is more in shadow, and then this is actually lit. So I'm going to do the same here. Like that. And then the underside of the arm, I actually feel like is too strong of a shadow. So I'm going to diffuse that. Oh, let me make sure my timer is still going down. 2 minutes. Okay. So if we turn that on and off, you can see how before the shadows almost feel randomized, but then if we really set our light source and then have everything work around that, that's when it will start to make the lighting feels like it is making more sense. And then same with his pants. This almost feels like way too much of a contrast. I don't know if you wanted the pants themselves to be made of water, but if you're going for more of an actual fabric, I would definitely lighten up how intense that light is falling on the jeans. I do think it would get lighter as it got closer to the light source, but it wouldn't be as dramatic. And then with the back of the jeans, I think you should start playing with bounce light as well. So pull some of that purple that is coming in that background and then play with it on the back of the leg, on the underside. Oops. And blend it in. And you'll be surprised on how much something can get rounded out just from like bounce light or even a rim light if you want to take that direction. The other thing that I just wanted to mention before I only have like a minute left is just be a little careful with your proportions. I see like on that other side of the foot, that ankle, it looks like it's that big, which is super, super small. But I feel like the rest of it actually reads pretty well. And just be careful that when you're doing something like this, you want to add in at least a little bit of subtlety to like the underlying anatomy. It doesn't even have to be that much. I'm going to try to make it very subtle here, but just to show like the shoulder cap or the arm muscle here. And it could be like super subtle. Oops. There's my timer. But you can see how before and after, we just have a bit more of a subtlety to like where the shoulder cap is. And then you can carry that down even like into the elbow. I would give just a bit more of attention to it. Oh, and then even like the neck, I would just get rid of that. And then play with your bounce light from the back on her neck. So overall, I think you have a lot of, I've seen a lot of growth in you in just the past year, just from what you posted on the community. And I do check actually what you guys post on like your own sketchbooks and stuff. So it's really cool seeing you push yourself. And I think this is one of those pieces where you might not have worked on in a long time, but I feel like if you took another stab at it now, you'd definitely be able to adjust some things. Okay. Our next piece here. This one was submitted through... This is Christie's. Oh, I didn't even see your name the first time I looked through the Paintover list. So this is Christy McAvee. I'm going to reset my timer and start it. And when I first opened this, and I think this was another one that I talked to my friends about, there's a lot of good going on. I just think there's a bit of proportion issue, and then working on the actual cloth and the fabric and making it look pulled and stretched in the right areas. But in terms of the way that you're handling some of the proportions, this may have it almost read to me immediately as a photo reference, just the way that the knee, I feel like it's something where you get that from a photo, but you might not get that from your imagination. So it's good that you're, at least my impression is you're using reference to your advantage. I just want to keep pushing you further. Okay, yeah, and the other thing I was going to talk about with yours is lighting. So in my little Paintover, I had the light source above, so that's our little sun. And I'm working based off the general direction that you had it originally. I'm just enhancing it further. So you can see what I did is I softened a lot of the creases that you had in the top of her tank top. I think you're adding in these stretch lines. I don't know if she has just like really heavy boobs, but there usually won't be that big of a stretch line in between them. And I would soften them up. And even with like the ones on her chest or on her stomach, usually there's going to be more crease lines where you have to think about like where is the fabric pulling. So in this case, it's almost like she's arching her back. And when you do that, these wrinkles that you have in the front, those actually won't be there. They'll probably be pulled down into more of wrinkles being in the back. So I took those out and I smoothed out the top ones. And then even on the arm, I thank you for every one that followed. Volerberg Cyborg says, don't say the word boobs, please. Boobs. Or I should say, oops. For her arm, I felt like there was too much of a contrast between a light and a dark value, so I softened that as well. And you can see how I'm really playing with the light source being overhead, so that back arm probably wouldn't be receiving that strong of a light. So I also took the shadow that you had on the hat and I amplified that, and I gave it the impression that if the light source is coming from overhead, the hat itself will be casting a shadow on her head and part of the neck. So when you're doing this, I know what you really want to show that you can draw the face and that there is some facial features within there. But I promise you, it's actually better to show your understanding of lighting over the fact that you can draw a face. Because if the light source is overhead, her face would actually be all in shadow. And there's no need to have the same kind of color palette that you're working on her face that you are with like the area in the arm and the leg. So I would darken those. And what was the other? Oh, and then Togepi. So with Togepi, you can see how we have some of these shadows coming in. Now, I love that you added a cast shadow from her arm onto the top of Togepi's little egg triangle thing. And the only thing that I see is it kind of rounds around. Now, I know Togepi's triangle parts aren't like perfectly straight, but even if they're slightly curved, it probably wouldn't be going that much into shadow if the light source is overhead, because then this would actually be catching that same light value. So with my initial paint over, I'm really just breaking it down into values. And I've been doing this a lot more recently where you almost have to like squint at your piece and then look for where are my dark values, where are my light values, and then focus on that before you even focus on the detailing. So like in this, I actually think there should be more of a cast shadow from her boobs, and then it goes down. And then this is something that I was talking to someone recently about, how in the crease area of fabric, you want to get darker than you might think. Oops, that's actually a little darker than I was thinking. So let me not get that dark, but a little darker. Yeah, something like that. Really show that there is a defined crinkle to the fabric that you're working with. Something like that. And then in terms of like this area here, this is a great focus area that maybe you could work on, where really try to make this feel accurate in terms of where the light source is coming from. So I'm just gonna do a quick. So we're gonna pull some of that lighter skin color down. Let me zoom out. So you can see how before and after, it's definitely a lot more subtle. And in that subtlety, we're getting more of a realistic impression. Now, I do teach a lot from a realistic standpoint of mine, but I think it's because it's so important to understand lighting and how that affects color. And then whatever style that you eventually have, you can pull it into your style. So then even with like the underside of this arm, this might be a great opportunity to try out bounce lighting. So first, let me go ahead and create a nice kind of separation of where the light falls versus where the shadow is. And then I'm going to do this on a new layer so I can turn it on and off. Or you know what? First I'm going to make that arm just a touch thicker. Like about there. Okay, and then on the new layer, I'm going to kind of mix this own color. Now, a bounce light will never, ever, ever be as strong as the initial light source. So the top color on her skin here is not going to be the same under here. The one underside on this bounce lit area is going to be just a little bit darker. Even that's actually a little heavy for bounce light, so maybe just soften it up. You can see how before and after, we're getting more of an impression of a form because of the way that we're doing our bounce light. Now, I do think there are just a little bit of some proportion issues. I think those could be easily fixed. The one other thing that I think I would like you to work on is focus on the hands and the way that you color them. Right now, it looks like you're working with almost 3 shades or tints, but I really want you to play with, like, let's throw some, I'm going to get an overlay in here. Oops, I'm going to go a little more red. Like, I would love to see, that's too light. Hold on. I would love to see some of the knuckle areas just becoming a little bit more red where the blood vessels are probably closer to the skin. So your knuckles, the joints, and then right around the fingernail area tends to be a touch more red. And I'm one of those people that I love working with darker hands, so I like to make hands slightly darker. So even with this, if the light source is coming from overhead, these fingers actually should be darker regardless. I'm going to do my best not to make it look like she just dunked her hand in like ketchup or like a tank of leeches and now she's bleeding everywhere. Because when working with red on hands, you do have to be kind of careful that you're not overdoing it. I think sometimes I do overdo it. And I'm just going to give some indentation to the bone structure underneath of the hand. I do think the shadow is a bit dark. No, actually, I kind of like that. So I'm going to grab that same shadow color from her. Or no, I'm going to grab this shadow color. Something like that. And just keep playing with it. Oops. So that the hand at least becomes like it has more form to it. Because right now it just reads as very white and then with like a touch of a pale skin color. So I want to see you push that further. But overall, great job. I think the togepi is super cute, by the way. So keep pushing it. And one more time, I'll just show the light source. So really try to break it down into where's the light source coming from, because right now that arm here looks like it's coming from the left. This one looks like it's coming from the right. And then if we just really unify that, having a really unified light source indication will really make the actual form of the subject matter just feel more real. Okay, I think we have 3 more. I know I'm already running kind of over my time limit, so I may have to cut the last one. I'm sorry. We'll see. You know what? I'm just gonna keep going, and we'll see if we can get to it. Okay. So this one, I remember when I pulled it up, my friend Gawky or Key, she really liked the style of it, but she wanted to see it pushed even further. And I know that, let me make sure, in your submission, you wanted the heart, yes, you wanted the heart and the veins to actually be flat, and that was your style where you wanted her to be more rounded and stylized, but then the heart to be more graphic as like an illustration, and it just be this pink. So when we got to this one, immediately I did want to round it out. I wanted to play with some of that, but this could be a case where this is your specific style. So I don't want to just alter your style so it reads as more realistic, but I'm going to give you some suggestions that you don't have to take, but just as to think about, and maybe you like the direction of it. So immediately I did just a quick color pass, I think just because I love cotton candy palettes, and I think this one, I really just wanted to push up those blue and purples. And as I was doing this, the other art crew was saying how maybe they should have more of a colored outline, kind of like Loesch. So I started adding more of a colored outline on the hair, and I definitely saw a lot of Loesch in it. So I think it would be good to experiment with a thicker outline, or at least trying more of an outline, because what you have right now, I think it gets kind of lost in areas, especially with like the vein or even the edge of the back and the arm. I think it could be pushed further, but that's another style choice. And what was the other? Oh, and then if you're going to have the shadow from the heart on the back and the top of the shoulder, I think you should carry that light source throughout the character and really show that this is more of a form. So I added shadows based on where the initial shadow placement of the heart was, underneath of her hair, her neck, and on top of her, like under her arm here, and then on her actual stomach. So you can see before and after the difference that that will make. Now, once again, this doesn't mean that this is the right way to do it, but if you're adding a shadow on the from the heart, I think it would be good if you added a shadow everywhere just to keep it more cohesive. And then the last thing that we were talking about was the hand. It felt very almost like smushed, and the wrist felt really far away from the arm itself. So I did just some quick altering in Liquify, and I don't recommend fixing proportions with Liquify. I think it's good to actually get in the habit of like painting over and trying to fix it that way. So here's the one that I slightly did. I still think it needs to be altered even further, because this one almost looks like it's like gripping the heart. But I would work with the distance between the thumb and the first finger, where right now it almost feels like it's so close, but there should be more of like an indication of line because the skin is pushing upon itself, so having more of a wrinkle. And then in my paint over, I really try to extend it because if it's holding this heart, where's a good object around here? My Jake mug. If her hand is reaching around this heart, you really want to show the distance of her gripping this object, because before it almost looked like it was resting on, and it didn't really give the impression that it's really like holding on to the heart. I needed that. Oh, sorry. This is from the name on the community is Hecro. And oh, and this was someone I want to say thank you because you said you were watching the stream since 2014. And I think that's really cool that you've been watching since then. So awesome. I'm glad I got to actually work on one of your pieces, and I hope that this helps you. So one of the critiques that Sean was saying is maybe try having an outline, not even just on the form itself, but maybe even on, or maybe it was Key that said it, but even with like this vein. I do like that you're having this graphic element next to this more realistic stylized, but I think it does get lost in some of the areas. So let's just see what it, and this is one of those things where maybe it just is an experiment that you want to see, like, well, what would it look with a slight outline? And if you end up not liking it, just make sure it's on its own layer and then delete it. Something more like this. Now, I think it should be kind of everywhere, so not just in that little section. But it's one of those things where maybe just play with that. And if you want to adjust the color, let's try maybe like something that's not so contrasted. Something like that might even work better. And I would work from there. Oh, and the other thing I did, you know what? Let me erase this. So I guess her boob did get a little bigger because we liquefied it up. But I also added some, and you can see it like on the top of the arm here and even on her back. I added just a slight light hue of this blue to round it out further. Now, I've definitely gotten into working with more of a matte looking finish on my characters. But I guess not only, I wouldn't say this is a critique, more of just like if anyone's wondering on how to round out their character slightly, if it's looking kind of flat, try amping up the value. So I'm going to do a quick value kind of pass on the shoulder area to show you how I would work that. Something like that. You can see before and after how now there's definitely more of an approaching feel to the shoulder because of the way that we're rounding it out with the form. Something like that. Now, overall, I actually really like this piece and I want to see you continue to develop this. In terms of critique, I think it might just be more in terms of pushing you in the style that you've already developed, because I don't think you're trying to reach like a full realism or trying to work with accurate lighting. So I want to see where you can push it with the color and with your composition. I do think the veins need to read a little better in some way. I don't know what direction you want to push that. I think it's just because the pink kind of blends in with the purple spots blotches that you have on the body, on her body, and I think that's why it kind of reads iffy, or how there's like some indication of line art to it in some areas, but then other areas it's just like a flat matte pink. So that would be something I would look for you to continue with as you go for it further. Okay, so that is this one. Thank you again for submitting. We got 2 more, and then we got the contest here. Okay, so this one is from our very own Jensen, and he goes by Jens on the community forum. So I know I even saw you post in the contest about how this one took you a very, very long time and you kind of feel burnt out. I am so proud of you for really pushing yourself on this one. I can see the amount of time and dedication you put into this, and I really can see you focusing on detail, which is awesome. I do think there are some issues with this, but I wanted you to know how proud I am that I can visibly see the amount of hours you put into this. So good job with that. Okay. So when you messaged on the Paintover, you said is one of your weaknesses is that you think you overcomplicate things and that you make things too detailed. Now, because I know there's something else you said in here. Let me read it really quick. Yes. Okay. So it was the idea of not making it so cluttered. And this was something that when I pulled this up to my friends last night, they definitely gave kind of the same critique of how it felt too much and that it's almost hurting the overall composition because of how much you want going on and being said within the story of the piece. Because I definitely can tell what's going on with this, what is this, Kyurem, the Pokemon, where he's, frozen the entire city, and then he stole you, froze you, and then your Pokemon, Venusaur, Charizard, and Blastoise are fighting against him. I think the story is really well. I don't think the composition, though, is helping right now. I think the way that you have the larger... There is no way that timer is already... Oh, I forgot to reset it. Okay, there we go. I think the way that you let me make a new layer. The way that you did this large Pokemon in the background, there's a lot of composition and interesting eye movement within just him. I think it would have been nice if you gave some more separation here so that the arm doesn't blend in so much with the back of his body. But I felt like this had a nice touch to it. But I think the opposite would be true when it comes to the starter Pokemon. I feel like these are almost placeholders because you want to get that story out. And I really do like that you're trying to tell a story here, but it just didn't feel like it was helping the composition. It felt like they were kind of slapped on. So to fix that, I think I would completely move some of the Pokemon in their stance in the way that we're looking at this. Like even having maybe if Blastoise would have been more here, shooting that way, with Charizard maybe flying up above and shooting his flame there, and then maybe Venusaur would be the one here shooting a solar beam. I think maybe having more of a dynamic where it's like foreground, middle ground, background of the different Pokemon, that might have helped out. And I think the other thing was, I love that you're really pushing your detail, but I think your light source, it doesn't really read as light source. And I do recognize that it's an overcast day, but then your fire almost feels like red lava. It doesn't feel so much like fire. And who knows, maybe you wanted the Charizard shooting lava, but I definitely think it reads more as lava or like something that's liquidy. And then for Venusaur Solar Beam, it almost gets grayed out, where if this was Solar Beam, I'll make a new layer here. I would have amped up the fact that this is like the power of the sun is about to be attacked. It's like building up in its attack, literally coming for your face. I would have really played up the lighting effect of that solar beam. And then when you do that, and actually I would have done that with the Charizard Fire Beam or Flamethrower or whatever move that this is, I would have made that more intense. But then in doing that, you should definitely play with the contrast. If you're adding such a lighter vibrancy to your piece, you want to make sure that the other areas around it reflect that. So then I would have made the area behind Bulbasaur way more in shadow. And then even with Charizard, I would have had him be almost completely in shadow if this is the position we're sticking with for Charizard. Just because there really is no need to have a light source behind the Charizard. Because if it's an overcast day, there probably isn't a light source that's strong enough to reach the Charizard on the back. You want to show some hints of form to it, but for the most part, I would rather you have an emphasis on the lighting and how that affects the area around it, rather than being like, no, this is the form of Charizard. You need to make sure that I show that I can understand the proportions and that I can add form to a character. I already know that you can add form to a character. You've proven this with your images before, and I want to see you now push yourself to focus on lighting and color, because I think that's the next stage for you. So then, like with this Venusaur, I really like you have a great foundation. It's really easy for me to paint over this because of how strong the initial paint was, or the initial form that you gave was. So now with this Venusaur, I would keep really strong cast shadows from like the leaves falling on his head, and I would make that solar beam a very strong light source. So then it would almost cover the entire top of his head. Something like that. And then the inside of his ear, I feel like it's being pushed out more, where it should be more concave. So instead, I'm going to push this inward. Something like that. So you can see before and after. And then even with like the background, I would even have that be slightly more out of focus. And I like, it's one of those things where I love that you're putting so much detail into it, but I think now you have to like concentrate and really recognize, okay, where should I really put the focus of the piece and make sure that that is really detailed, and do have that be your center of attention when you're working on it. Because right now I feel like I agree with your roommate where I don't think there really is much of a focus point, and I want you to kind of define the entire composition. Because right now I think you wanted to showcase these three Pokemon doing their big moves on the larger Pokemon, but I think at the moment it doesn't help the composition in any way. Where if you did move the Charizard up here, shooting the flamethrower, and then the Blastoise more in this area, now you have more of a dynamic image where the perspective, you feel the depth. And I think that could have really helped you here. But I'm only nitpicking, I think, because I care about you as an artist and I want to see you grow. Because I I know that when I really put a lot of time and effort into a piece, it does suck when someone is giving critique on it. But I think not only do I think you can handle the critique, I feel like you wouldn't have submitted it to the submission critique form if you didn't want me to really give it everything I had to this. Okay. So now like under this character, this is another good area where we could have added some of that darker region. Really give contrast to this ice beam or whatever it is that's coming out of his mouth. You can see where before and after, how all of a sudden that ice beam really has an emphasis on how it's almost like emitting its own light. It's like this glacial, frozen shot. I don't know how to describe it, but it does give more emphasis to it. And then same with Blastoise's hydro pump. I think this is another thing that could have been amped up. And then the area around it, I would have purposely just made a little darker to give more emphasis to the fact that he's doing this hydro pump. Now, the other challenge that you did throw in here, which I am super excited about, is you have so many isolated light sources that you need to work with. Kind of like with the critique I did earlier with the girl that had the green magic whip that was going around her. Whenever you add such a dominant light, it's like a secondary light source like that, you want to make sure that it's added everywhere. And I can see that with the flamethrower that you added in, with the solar beam, you edged out the characters with that light, and you gave it more of a form by adding in that rim light. But I think you need to carry it on everywhere, and I feel like some areas just didn't quite carry it as well. So like on Blastoise's head, I think if you would have had like a stronger light on the ridges of his eyes that were actually facing the flamethrower, I think it would have read a bit stronger. Something like that. And same with his, the cannons that are on Blastoise's back. I don't think you even really needed to add much of that rounded highlight. I would have kept it more matte. Something like that. And then I would have pushed that yellow, if that's the color that we wanted to kind of reflect off of the flame. And even given some orange, just to really emphasize the heat that is coming from this flamethrower. There are some tangent issues as well. The flamethrower and the hydro pump they're like kissing right here, where I would have either put the hydro pump in front of the bottom of that, or actually that's what I would do. I would put the hydro pump in front of the flame. Otherwise, I think it's too much of a tangent. But I love the solar beam. I think that is my favorite action shot that you threw in here, where the rest kind of feel like they're floating, where this one actually feels like it's really being pushed in that action, and whoever captured this image captured that right at the right second. So I think this is really well done in terms of growth from an artist, and I love see you pushing yourself, but I think now you need to push yourself in terms of lighting and how that affects your color, and really think of the overall composition. And I hope you continue to enter these contests, and I want to see where you go from here. So thank you again for submitting. Okay, and then my timer was just about to go off, so I stopped it. And we have one more. Okay, so this is the last one, and then we will go through the contest winners. So I'm going to start the timer. We're going to only do, I think, 5 minutes on this one, though. And I think it's because I know what I wanted to say about this one before, and it really shouldn't take too long. So I'm just going to repeat a lot what I've said before, where even though this is more of like an art piece, it's not so much of like a character study or a concept art piece. You still want to focus on proportions and the way that it's lit. I think if you have a light source that's coming from overhead, actually it's funny looking at this now, I feel very much like I'm painting on The Ring or on The Grudge. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I need to be looking at the comments too. Okay, it doesn't look like there's many questions right now. But you guys are really funny. One of you said that critiquing is kind of mean. I promise you, the more that you get into the habit of throwing away the mindset of critiquing is mean, the sooner that you'll be able to absorb what the person's saying and then decipher for yourself if is that valuable feedback for me to work further upon. Because for a while, even when I was in college, it was kind of easy for me to be like, oh yeah, that looks good. And then once I started to realize that's actually more harmful to that artist than helping them, I felt like every time I was saying, oh no, that looks good, I was actually being mean because I wasn't giving my honest opinion. And I try to always be honest nowadays. And two, it's hurting them because then they're allowing themselves to settle at whatever level they set for themselves. So you want to make sure that by helping them, you have to give them constructive criticism that you truly believe on. Okay. I'm starting to lose my voice, so hopefully I can get through this one. All right. So with the light source coming from overhead, I would definitely make this more of a solid red. But then if our light source is coming from overhead, I do think you should focus on the shadow placements that you have. I think that Adam's apple is a bit big. It almost looks like something was almost lodged in the throat. But we're going to work with more of a smooth looking throat here. So with our light source, now if we define it from overhead, I'm going to kind of edit a lot of this. So with the collarbone even, it'll probably be more subtle, not as defined. And I'm really working with the style. I'm not going for a realistic version of what I'm drawing here. So I know if I was doing more realistic, I would definitely lift that collar up. There's a lot of proportion issues with the stomach. And even if you wanted this to be stylized, I still think there's some areas that need to be pushed and pulled. So let me go ahead. I'm going to actually bring up my liquefy filter here. Oops, it's on my other screen. All right. So immediately, I think the boobs need to be higher. The arm feels relatively too thick for how big the rest of the body is. And you'll notice that when you liquefy anything, you'll always get this kind of a weird distortion to it. So whenever I liquefy, I kind of know that I'm going to have to go back in and fix it. And I usually fix it by painting over it. So I already know as I'm editing this that I'm going to have to go back in. And I'm trying not to distort the style that you seem to have gone with too much. Choose OK. So you can see how we've really edited it. And if you really wanted more of that longer torso, I'm still going to push it in. So it really does have kind of this creepy effect to it. So you can see how we're just slightly editing it, but even within that style, it feels like it's more on point in terms of the proportions we've set up. I may have to actually, I just realized I got to keep this PG. We're going to just blur those out a little further. Okay. So with this, I'm going to go ahead now and continue. So I guess with her, I'll say her breast being so low, I'm going to raise her collarbones. And then just kind of like how we did with Christie's, we're going to have this light source be more unified. And there really shouldn't be that much of a light source coming from below. This is a good example under her breast where it shouldn't be like, oh, I got stuck in reading the comments. Yeah. I think just to be safe, I don't know if we have any younger kids that, I don't know, they shouldn't be looking at I don't know. I have a weird opinion where I think that when you're studying the human form, it is more of a study of art. It really shouldn't be something that's not safe for work, but there's a lot of discussions that we can have on that. So underneath of her boobs, though, I don't want to have the shadow getting super dark, where instead I'm going to have more of a consistent shadow underneath that acts as a cast shadow. And you'll see what I mean as we continue to do this. Oh, Faith just said we're just joking about it being PG. I just gotta be careful, you never know. Okay, so then with the stomach line where the abdominals are separated, I don't think it should be as dark of a line. It should be more of a subtle one. We're getting something like that. So you can see before and after how it was like a black line, and now we're smoothing it out into being more of the form, and that contrast between those forms are actually creating the muscle look. Same here. I'm going to have a blended edge. There, something like that. So you can see before and after how we're blending it out, but we're still keeping it in a realistic sense. And I would carry that throughout the rest of the piece. So the top of her chest area and almost like in her neck and collarbone, it feels too light. I try to avoid working in that light of a contrast. So I'm just going to dim most of it here. Thank you guys for whoever just clicked follow. And that way, if we wanted to add more highlights on top, it does become a lot easier. So now I can grab like, oh, is this pure white? Really? Wait. Oh, it doesn't look white on my screen. That's weird. Well, I thank you guys for following. All right, so you can see how we can round things out a lot easier and then like add in those little touches on the collarbone to round those out and give more definition to them. Same with like the top of the shoulder. So I would continue working with that. I think and even like the shadow underneath here, you can see how I'm not going super black, but now that it's more of a uniform shadow, it just reads a lot better than before when it just had like this weird black underneath, where now it has more of a uniformity to it. And I feel like I'm just making up words at this form. Uniformity. Okay. So, I think we're about ready to do our contest announcements. Okay. Let me get a drink of water because we just went through 9 critique paintovers. So hold on. Whew, thank you guys for listening to all that. I'm sorry I couldn't answer your questions as much. What are you guys saying right now? Thank you guys. You guys are too nice. Yeah, thank you guys. Okay. Oh, wait. Okay. So here, oops. That's not what I did. I wanted this one. Okay. Are you guys ready? I'm going to announce the CG Cookie Concept 2016. Done. Okay. I'm going to announce the 2016 Summer Contest results. Now, this one is the first fan art contest that we've ever done at CG Cookie and probably will be few and far between. I actually like doing original contests better. I think I was just excited with Pokemon Go and Team Winstinct, and I think that I just carried that into the contest, but I think for the next year, we're going to do all original ones, and I'm actually really excited for the Halloween one. I'm going to have my special panel of guest judges, and I'm a sucker for Halloween. I love everything Halloween, so hopefully we're going to have some fun live streams during that time as well. Now, for this summer contest, though, let's do a reminder of the prizes. So, first place gets $200 to Amazon. They get a 1-year CG Cookie membership. They get featured on across the concept side of CG Cookie and the obvious bragging rights. Second place gets a $100 gift card to Amazon and 3 months of Citizen. And then third place gets $25 and a 1 month to CG Cookie. And the same with the community award. You get the membership along with knowing that your image was the most loved. Now, when we do the Halloween contest, I think we're going to amp up the prizes even more. So I'm excited to do that. But I wanted to give you guys one more reminder before we go ahead and announce the winners. Okay, so the only award that you guys already know who won, if you just looked at the actual post on our community site, was our community award, and that was the one that received the most likes or the most hearts on the image. And the one that won the community award was Koinonimus, if that's how you pronounce your name. You received 50 hearts from people across the CG Cookie Network. And this was actually one of my favorite ones for a while, just because I love the scene that you created. I can see the story, and it's just like a fun little sidetrack of like, this guy's riding a Bulbasaur with these Weeping Bells and the Bellsprout following behind. It had this just fun energy to it. And I actually like the rendering that you did on Bulbasaur's bulb. I think if you would have pushed that everywhere, I think I would have liked this even more. And I think with the rest of the entries, I saw like little Easter eggs, like people would hide Pokemon in the background. And I think I wanted to see more of that because I can see the red eyes that you added like in the tree trunks. I think if you gave more indication of what those were, I think that would have been really cool as like a side Easter egg. And oh, it looks like you're in the chat. So congratulations. You are the winner of the community award. Now, as I go into the top 3, I want you guys to know that literally there were 13 that I wanted in the top 3. I had to talk with a few of my friends and the judges. And then I even did another call with Sean this morning, actually, and even my roommate Tyler, on just getting final critique and seeing are these 3 the right 3? Because I want you guys to know it's really hard to pick the top 3. I'm critiquing it on so many different levels. And I think with the next few contests, we'll get a little bit more specific, because if we did something that was specifically on like perspective or color or costume design, I think it's really easy to critique just on that single independent variable. But when it comes to something that's so open-ended, there's so many styles and so many interpretations, and it does become a little hard to define. So I want you guys to know that there are so many that I think could have won, but I think these top 3 were just the ones that barely edged above the others. So just know I was really impressed with the amount of entries. I think we had over 100 entries, or just under. It was somewhere in that range, and I really loved the creativity, and there's some that actually made me laugh. So thank you guys. Okay, so the bronze award and your third place winner of the CG Cookie Summer Contest is Astri. Now, this was one that at first glance, I really loved the rendering on her. And this is one that almost didn't make the cut. And I was bouncing between this and I think 3 others for the third place spot. And I just want to say congratulations for edging it out. I think just because the more that I took a look at this, the more I realized the story that was going on. And I really, really like those subtle Easter eggs that give the viewer an opportunity to look further into the piece. I love adding that kind of stuff where you can see something different upon each viewing. I do think, though, you should have pushed it further, because unless if someone really looks at the image, they're not going to be able to catch it. With this one, the story that I read is you are Team Valor, and you and your Charizard are going into the Arctic to catch a Pokemon. Now, that's the initial impression, but if you look closer, you have a Master Ball drawn in here, and on your Pokédex, there's actually an Articuno being displayed. So it really brought the whole scene together on how you are in this mountainous area because you wanted to catch that Articuno. And I love that, but I don't think it was implied enough, or it was expressed easily enough unless if you're like me and I'm really like looking into these pictures for it to read as well. I do think the mountain area could be rendered a bit further, and even with like some of the foreground. I admire and applaud you for doing this extreme low angle shot of the character. And I think that's why there were some of my friends that thought some of the perspective issues may have hurt it. Like I think the Charizard, one of my art crew said that maybe he should have been, you could see more of like the underside of him and the perspective that he's flying at. It maybe would have been better if you saw more of under him. And I think this is one that I really liked, and I pushed this one to the third spot just because I like the story that's being told. So congratulations. And to all the winners, I will be sending out an email tomorrow on what you've won and probably information so that we can send you the gift cards if you won one. Okay, so that was our third place winner. And now for our second place winner of our CG Cookie 2016 Summer Contest goes to Alexander Trentyev. I am so sorry if I mispronounced that, but on the community site, you go as Tesloa2. Now, this one, I remember first seeing it and immediately it caught my attention. I think the energy in this is so good. I love distorted perspective. And this reminds me of a lot of games like No More Heroes or Ace Ventura, Ace Attorney, and what's that game? The World That, I forgot what it's called. But it has a similar style to this. And I love that the energy in this is like chaotic, but it's so controlled. And honestly, the Snorlax that was flying in the background, like actually made me chuckle when I first saw it. I was like, who threw Charizard, or how the heck has he thrown himself in that direction? And I like all the Pokemon that you've thrown. This has a really nice composition balance where my eye is going through it. And this is a great example also of you don't need to render something for a really awesome quality image. The little nuances that you put in here really make the image so strong. Even like the action lines on the Pokeball, the way that the hand has like a distorted look toward the camera. Everything, I really, really enjoyed this one. So congrats on winning the silver medal for our summer contest. Thank you guys. It's called The World Ends With You. And I'm pretty sure there's another big one that I'm missing. Maybe Persona. I feel like there's another really big style that's similar to this. I just can't think of off the top of my head. So congratulations again to this one. And this one definitely made me laugh. Okay. So now for the number one place on our list, this is one that I was going back and forth with a few of the art crew, a few of my coworkers, and this one was the one that consistently came up with every single person. And the more that I thought about it, the more that I realized this was the winner. And I want to give a big congratulations to our number one spot and the winner of our CG Cookie 2016 contest. Drum roll is Nobu. And I want to give a big congratulations not only for the winning the piece, but also for what you've created here. I think this shows your strength in storytelling, in color, in lighting understanding, and I immediately fell in love with the story that you told here. And without having to be so blatant on specifically telling what's going on, you can tell that he's trying to fix a Pokeball. He has like his little app open on like the insides of a Pokeball. He has his pen that acts as a little fixing unit, and he's fixing the inside while Raichu is lighting the scene. Clefairy is like oblivious and just attracted to the light, and then Dragonair is just looking over like, yeah, all right, yeah, we got this. So, and you're in the chat. Thank you. Or not thank you, congrats. So big congrats. And congrats to you, Tesla, too. I just think this was such a cool piece to be the winner of the contest. You really followed the guidelines. And as I was talking about earlier, I loved like hidden gems. This one definitely had the two owls, Nocturnal, and I forgot what the other owl's name is, but you have the two owls in the background. The lighting reads so strong with like his tail, and I think the Clefable and the Raichu alone are super strong. I do think there's areas in the shadow area on Clefairy that could be a little lighter. where I felt like it got a little dark, but regardless, I still think your lighting in the way that you're handling bounce lighting, you can see how Raichu's kind of butt area is reflecting back onto Clefable or Clefairy. I think that's Clefable actually. And I think you did a really great job in your understanding of color, and I want to see you push it further, and I can't wait to see what you come up with next. So big congrats. And this is one of those things where if you want me to do a critique for you, if you're watching right now, and I'll send you a message if you're not watching, but I think I would like to give you a one-on-one critique on this and how I think you could even push it further, because this is such a strong piece. I think there's just some things I see that I would like to help you out with. So huge congratulations again to Nobu and to all the winners. And literally there were 13. I can't emphasize enough that there were 13 that I really thought could have been in the top 3. So it was a really hard choice, and I want to thank, what were the 9 honorable mentions? I will post that in, I'm making a post on the community site right after I get my food after this, and it'll show the rest of the ones. But you know what? Since I have you guys here, let me show you. I don't want to leave you hanging. Oh, is it not going to open? Oh, I don't think it's going to let me. Oh, it's only going to let me show a few of them. But here are a few of the ones that just came short. Oh, this one. I remember talking with the art crew last night on how this one has such an awesome style. This Mew alone is so strong. Like you could almost crop that Mew as like a character creature design, and it's wonderful. I think the character is actually the one thing that threw it off. The folds in his clothes don't really make as much sense, and I think if you just focus on maybe studying folding in fabric, I think that would help it out. Also, Team Winstinct. There were so many Instinct submissions. That was really awesome to see. This one I love. I love this owl on the top of his head. He's like my favorite part. But the ones that really told a story, I think, were the ones that really connected with the judges. This was another one. I really like the way that you rendered. I believe this is Moltres. I don't know if it's Ho-Ho. It could be Ho-Ho. Or not Moltres, I'm sorry. Firo. I think this is Firo. But I really like the way that you rendered it. I think this has some of the same issues that Jensen had in terms of the composition doesn't read all together because you wanted to like fit certain elements in. But I think if you just broke it down into does my eye read in the composition well, I think that should be your first goal, and then render it out the way you did, because this is beautifully rendered, especially on the head here. Like you can even see, like I think there's some issues with the pants and the shoes and the way that those are folded. This one was actually one of my personal favorites. If it was just me judging, I think this would have gone further in the standings. I just love the idea of this world of Pokemon where it seemed funny, where you can have your Pokemon eat in the pool that you're swimming in. It's crazy, it's kind of dirty, but I love that idea. And it's not going to let me show the other ones, but I promise I'll post the other winners or the other honorable mentions in the post that I make. So you can find that on community.cgcookie.com. It'll probably be up in about 2 to 3 hours. So congrats again to all the winners, and to everyone that submitted. I want to give a big thank you. I'm definitely going to put a lot more emphasis on our Halloween contest. We're going to have our special guest judges on the panel, and I can't wait to see the submissions for that one. So thank you guys, and thank you to those that submitted for the Paintover. These are always fun to do. Sometimes I get long-winded and I'm kind of out of breath, but they're fun for me to do, and I hope you guys learn from them as well. I don't know what we're going to do next week, but I think I'm going to look at what you guys submitted in the suggestion box, which is down below, and hopefully I'll be able to pick one of those to do. So, okay, thank you guys again for coming, and hopefully we'll see you next week. All right, and thanks for everyone that followed. Okay, enough thanking. Bye, guys. Oh, wait, nope, I can't end the stream. Hold on. There we go. Oh, now it's showing. Hold on. All right, for those of you who can't wait to see the honorable mentions, these were them. So actually this one, and these include the winners as well. This one I actually really, you know what, the Pokeballs hanging as like a wind chime on the side was my favorite part, because in my eyes, the story that I created was this person used to be like an Ash Ketchum, and he's traveled the world, and he has these really powerful Pokemon, but now they're aging and they're older, and they're all kind of retired. They're getting ready to, I don't want to say die, but they're ready to pass on. And these Pokeballs that are in the wind chime, to me, that represented the Pokemon that have passed on already, and he's hanging them. And then when he hears the wind pass and it makes that chime noise, he's reminded of the Pokemon that have left him. So I don't know why my mind immediately goes sad with things, but that's what I saw with this one, and I really like that. The ramen one, again, I love that. This was another one of those where I love the rendering in this. It's like a scary looking turkey Pokemon, but I think in a realistic sense it works. Obviously, once again, with the owl, I love that. The Mew. Jensen's piece, I really love the time and effort. I just think more focus on the color and light. The winner, the third place. This was one where it has a really cool story to it, where you can kind of tell what's going on. I think if you just pushed the rendering and have more fun with the detailing process, I could see this one even going further. And then I think this is the last one, but this one definitely had a cute little anime representation of a contest entry that I felt had really good elements within it. I just wanted to see it pushed further because I wanted to see more like a Pokemon connection. And I think that was all of them. Yep, and that was all of the 13. So, okay. Thank you guys for real this time, and look forward to the final post in a few hours. Okay.